So in this video, I'm going to show a amazing piece of astronomy that ties in with my Bible chronology that I've gone over in some of my other videos. So if you've watched my other videos, you'll know that when I add up all the dates in the Bible, I came up to a year of creation as 3967 BC. So what I want to do is I want to go take a look at the astronomy in the skies in the year 3967 BC and see what's going on at that time. See if it matches up with the concept of it being the year of creation. And what you'll find is a really amazing piece of astronomy, which I'm going to show you right now. So in order to go over this astronomy, first I have to review what happens in Genesis chapter 1 of the Bible. So I'm going to paraphrase basically the order of the sequence of the days of creation in Genesis chapter 1. And you can go read Genesis chapter 1 too for the exact verbiage. But basically how it works is this. In the beginning God creates the heavens and the earth is without form and void, and darkness is upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moves upon the face of the waters. So what you have is the earth is in a state of dark, void waters, and the Spirit of God is moving over it, and there's darkness over it. And then day 1, God says, let there be light, and light is created. Okay, so that's day 1 is light. Day 2, he separates the waters above from the waters below, and he creates sky. Okay, so that's day 2, separating the waters and creating sky. Day 3, he lets dry land appear, and the waters are gathered into one place, and seas are created, oceans and so forth. And so day 3, you have the appearance of earth, dry land. And then that dry land begets vegetation. So you have the appearance of plants and so forth. So day 3 is the appearance of the earth. Day 4, he places the sun, the moon, and the stars in the heavens for timekeeping purposes. So we have the appearance of the sun, the moon, and the stars on day 4. In day 5, he lets the waters underneath the heavens bring forth fishes and birds, and the birds go and fly in the heavens. So the waters are teeming abundantly with life. So in day 5, we have the waters under heaven begetting life, fishes and then birds, and the birds fly up in the heavens. And then the birds, it says the birds, they reproduce in the earth after they're created out of the waters. So then, on day 6, you have the creation of animals and man. And that's all talked about in Genesis 1 and in Genesis chapter 2. So the creation of animals and man on day 6, but man being the chief creation there. And then day 7, of course, is a day of rest, where basically nothing's going on at that point. So, knowing that, let's now take a look at what's going on in the astronomy of what I come up with the year of creation, which is 3967 BC. Okay, so to understand the ancient timekeeping system, the new year used to start in the spring throughout the ancient world. That's kind of where you get April Fool's Day from. It's the old New Year. But then the Romans and so forth switched it to the winter solstice, to December. But prior to that time, for thousands of years, the new year was always in the spring. And the way you determine the first month of the year is in the zodiac. Each sign of the zodiac, when the sun is in the skies present in that sign, it usually spends about a month in each sign. That's how you know what month it is. Okay, so not specifically, the moon has to pass by for the start of the month, because the month is based on the moon. It's called moon month. You can see the etymology there. But suffice to say, what happens is the moon takes about 30 days to run through the zodiac, and the sun takes about a year to run through the zodiac. And the sun spends about a month. Each month, the sun will be approximately in one sign of the zodiac as it goes throughout the cycle throughout the year. And every time the moon passes by the sun, it starts a new month. And then it takes about 29 or 30 days or so for the moon to get around back to the sun again. Okay. So, typically, in ancient times, the first month of the year is when the sun is in Aries. Now, possibly Taurus if you go back far enough, because there's something called the precession of the equinoxes, which is that over time the zodiac itself will slowly rotate as the Earth rotates on its axis, and wobbles on its axis, called precession. And about every roughly 2,400 years, the zodiac will shift over one sign. That's how slowly it moves. And in ancient astronomy, these are called ages. So you hear that song that's like, this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius, and so forth. It's talking about the shifting of the zodiac one sign over, so that now, whereas spring might have been reckoned in the past, like right now I think the first month almost you could reckon it from Pisces, when it officially finally shifts over one spot, which takes about 2,400 years, when we cross that point, now we might start spring in the sign of Aquarius, when the sun is in Aquarius instead of Pisces, and so forth. So if you go back far enough in ancient times to around the time of creation, really probably when the sun is in Taurus is probably when the first month of creation would be, because of the shifting of the sign of the zodiac. However, for most of ancient history, that is most of recorded history in ancient times, typically when the sun is in Aries, that is considered the first month. That's considered spring. Now there is an exception, because a lot of calendars use what's called a lunar solar calendar system, where they add a leap month every couple years. And this is called Adar 2. And so that might, every couple years, it might shift the start month of spring off, a sign or two. But that's an exception to the rule. Generally speaking, Aries is usually the start of the month, the start of the new year. Okay, so knowing what the start of the year would be in ancient times, we'll go back and look in the spring of 3967 BC when the sun is in the sign of Aries, because that's approximately the start of the year. Okay, so what we find, and this to me is very amazing, what we find in 3967 BC is that when the moon is crossing the sun, so this is the start of the month, this is the beginning of the first month, the first day of the month, because the moon passing the sun sets the days, okay? So as the moon passes the sun, that's the start of the month. When the sun is in Aries, at the start of the year, at the first day of the month, as the moon begins to pass the sun, what we find is that the sun is in a state of eclipse, okay? The moon is covering the sun. So this is March 12th, around midnight. So March 11th going into March 12th. So around March 12th, after midnight, we have the sun is in a state of eclipse, okay? The moon is covering it. So let's compare this now to the first verses of Genesis. It says that darkness was upon the face of the deep. Okay, so we have an eclipse. We have a state of darkness. All right. Now, I'm going to go over some of the visible planets here so I can explain these. Timekeeping in ancient times depended upon 5 visible moving heavenly bodies: the sun, the moon, the planet Mars, the planet Venus, the planet Mercury, the planet Jupiter, and the planet Saturn. Those were the visible moving heavenly bodies. The other planets like Uranus and so forth, and Neptune, those planets could not be seen by the naked eye. Only the 5 visible planets, the sun and the moon, could be seen by the naked eye. So they used those for timekeeping. And that's actually where you get the names of the days of your week from. So for example, in Latin cultures, Latino languages like Spanish and so forth, the names of the week are: Monday is Lunis, which is lunar, the moon. Tuesday is Martis, where you get Mars. Wednesday is Miraculous, where you get Mercury, and so forth. So the names of the days of the week, they're all named after the visible planets. And so those visible planets were very important for timekeeping in ancient times. Okay, so just to go over what some of the representations of these planets are. Jupiter, the planet Jupiter, comes etymologically from the Proto-Indo-European word, which is Deus Pita, or Zeus Pater, as it gets transferred into the Greek, and becomes Jupiter. And basically the translation of that is Pater is father, like paternity, and Zeus or Deus means basically sky, or God in the sky. Okay, It also can eventually becomes God, a name for God, like Theo or Zeus, so forth. But the original etymology for that, for Jupiter, is Dies Pater, which means sky father, or our Father who is in heaven. Okay? So the planet Jupiter, it kind of represents the king planet. The planet that represents, in a way, the king or the father in heaven. Okay? In a way, God. At least in pagan cultures. Not saying that Jupiter is God. I'm saying that in pagan cultures, that's how they viewed it. Okay? So, Jupiter obviously was a god to the Greco-Romans and so forth. I actually think it's based on Japheth. That Japheth becomes Jupiter, and he gets worshipped as a god over time. So, but anyways, the point being is that we have a representation of Jupiter as the father in the sky. Okay. Then you have another planet, Venus, and that in ancient times is commonly referred to as the Queen of Heaven, or the she planet. Sometimes the morning star, and so forth. There's actually two morning stars. There's Mercury and Venus, because what happens is Mercury and Venus are the inner planets that they always stay around the sun. When you look in the sky, they basically move through the zodiac with the sun and kind of always stick around, moving back and forth, but they're always near the sun. So they're the morning stars because they always arrive just before the sun shows up in the morning, and the evening stars because they're always around kind of just after the sun sets, depending on what side of the sun they're on at any given time. So Venus is the she planet, and in Hebrew, it's Kokavet, which is basically means the planet, but it's conjugated in the female form. So it's basically the female planet. Whereas Mercury is Kokav, which is the male form. It's just the planet, but it's the male form. And then you got Kokavet, which is the female form, which is Venus. So you have the male planet is Mercury, the female planet is Venus, representing, in a way, man and woman. Okay? Now, Venus is considered the queen of heaven, or the queen of the sky. And you can even see this concept when you look at Venus, the makeup of Venus. Venus is a planet that's totally covered in clouds. So it's very analogous to being a planet of the heavens or the sky or the clouds and so forth. Whereas a planet like Mars is red, and red is usually in the Bible considered analogous to Earth, because the name Adam basically, in a way, means red. The word dam means blood, but Edom means red, a derivation of the name Adam. And Adam is taken out of Adamah, which is a name for the ground in Hebrew, which essentially is this concept of like red clay or red earth. So the concept of the earth being red is very entrenched in, or at least red clay and so forth being the earth, is very entrenched in the biblical Hebrew. So Mars, being the red planet, very much could represent the earth. Okay, so so far we got Jupiter is the father in heaven, we got Venus representing the sky, Mars representing the earth, Mercury representing man, the male planet. Then we've got the darkness of the abyss, because again, looking at our first day here, we have the sun in a state of eclipse. Okay, and so in Genesis 1 it says that darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved on the face of the waters. So the darkness and the abyss, the deep waters, are kind of synonyms of each other. So the darkness kind of represents the deep primordial ocean, that the earth, the state of the earth before it became was formed into existence by God, into plants and animals and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so the darkness over the face of the deep, I'm going to go through now what happens on this first month of creation, or these first few weeks of creation. And what you see is that in 3967 BC, the planets in the heavens, from the very start of creation, tell the story of Genesis chapter 1, which is amazing to me. Okay, so I'm going to show you that now. So In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So the sun is covered in an eclipse on this very start of the month, of the start of the year of 3967 BC. Darkness is covering the face of the earth, the face of the deep. Okay? Then let's move ahead one day. It says, God says, let there be light. The eclipse passes away. Okay? Light comes into existence, and more specifically, the moon begins to have its first little sliver. It's about 1.5% illuminated, and in ancient times, after the moon passes by the sun, and you begin to see that first little sliver of the moon showing, that's how you would determine the first day of the month in ancient times. So when you see that light of the first sliver of the moon, you know you have the first day. And this is kind of what's going on in the story of Genesis. And God said, let there be light. And he saw the light, and the light was good. And he separated the light from the darkness. The light he called day, the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. So what's happening here is, I'll back this up a day here. The sun is in a state of eclipse. And then one day later, let there be light on the first day. The moon has its first sliver of light. And it's passing by Jupiter, okay, which again was the sky father, so the Father in heaven. So the Father in heaven is inspecting each of these events as they occur. So the first thing that happens that passes by that the Father in heaven inspects is to see the light of the first day, the sliver of the moon, okay? So God said, let there be light. He saw the light was good. He separated the light from the darkness. The light God in heaven calls day, and the darkness he calls night. He basically was the witness that this was the first day. And so therefore, we have the astronomy of the heavens are starting to tell the story of Genesis chapter 1. Okay. Now, let's move ahead in intervals of 7 days at a time. All right? Because it's customary that every 7 days, like you go to church every 7 days, you come before God every 7 days. So we're going to show kind of like these planets coming before Jupiter, representing the sky father. Now, I'm not saying that Jupiter is God or worshiping as God or anything like that. I'm just saying that this is for telling a story. Jupiter is just a planet. It's just a created thing. But that God wrote his story in the heavens. Okay. So, as the moon passes by Jupiter, that's day 1. So now we're going to move 7 days ahead. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The next planet that's passing by is Venus. Okay. On day 2 of creation, God created the skies, the heavens. He called them Shemayim in Hebrew. Venus is the queen of heaven. It's the planet that represents the sky. So on our day 2 of creation, we have the planet that represents the sky passing by the planet that's the sky father, if you will. Okay? Let's move ahead to day 3. We'll go 7 more days. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now we have Mars passing by Jupiter, okay? And Mars, again, the red planet representing Earth. On day 3 of creation, God created the earth. He said, let the waters be gathered together under heaven and let dry land appear. So you have the appearance of Earth on day 3. Let's move ahead 7 more days. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, okay? Now we have the sun passing by Jupiter. Okay? And on the 4th day, God created the sun, the moon, and the stars. He created the great light of the sun to rule over the day, the lesser night, the moon to rule over the night, and the stars also. So here, the chief of the creation of day 4, which is the sun, is what's passing by Jupiter on day 4 of our cycle, the representation of day 4 of our cycle. So now we're going to go ahead 7 more days. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Now we have the moon back again, but the moon has gone through its cycle and it's returned to a state of darkness because it's beginning to pass by the sun. And so it's 0.01% illuminated. It's basically in a state of complete darkness because it's so close to the sun. And again, if you remember, the darkness represented the depths of waters of the abyss. So on day 5, it's the waters bring forth the life of the birds and the fishes. Okay, he says, let the waters swarm with swarming things with fishes and let them produce flying birds in the heavens and so forth on day 5. So here, on day 5 of our cycle here, we have a representation again of the waters, which begot the fishes and the birds. Let's move to day 6. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now we have Mercury passing by Jupiter. And again, Mercury representing man, because Venus was the female planet and Mercury is the male planet. So on day 6, the chief creation was the creation of man. Okay, so we have man being created on day 6, and then if we go 7 more days, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, now nothing is passing by Jupiter. This is the day of rest. In 6 days, God created the world. On the 7th day, he rested. So, my point with this is that when you add up all the dates in the Bible, according to my chronology, and you go back and you look in the heavens, what you find is that on the year that I came up with, based on my adding of the dates of the Bible, as the year of creation, the heavens retell the story of Genesis chapter 1, of the creation of the heavens and the earth. It's all there written in the stars. And it's amazing to me. So to me, this is confirmation that this has to be the time of creation. And it starts at the very first month. So I want to show a couple other things here too. So if we back up to that day, that was day 5, okay, on the creation cycle. That's when the moon is passing by Jupiter for the second time. And so I'm going to go to this is probably the end of day 5, the start of day 6. So it's the completion of day 5, the start of day 6, and this is when man is created. This is when man would have been first around after this point to visibly see the stars. So what we're going to do is we're going to move now that if this is the completion date for day 5, we're going to move ahead into that week of day 6. We're going to move to dawn, which is roughly around 4:30 or so in the morning. So we're getting past that point a little bit. We're going to move about 4:30 in the morning. I'm going to bring up the Earth. Okay, so actually it's a little more. It's probably more like 5:30 in the morning. So let's go to about 5:30 in the morning, and I'm looking at the east. So you can see this is the east here. And as I progress in time, you can see that we see the stars moving on the horizon. And this is April 10th of 3967 BC. Actually, well, okay, if you notice here on the time frame it says negative 3966, that's because there's no year 0. So it's actually 3967 BC. That's just the way the computer calculates it. All right, so I'm actually at 6, not 5:30 in the morning. I'm actually around 6:30 in the morning. Okay, so 6:30 in the morning, we begin to see the sun coming up over the horizon. We begin to see Jupiter and Mercury over here, and we see the moon. What's happening at this point in time is at the very time, this would be like if man is created at the very start of this time. And this is the first time that man can visibly see the stars in the heavens and understand them and convey information to them from them. Man is looking at horizon at dawn, and he's seeing these stars rise up. Just as the sun begins to come up over the horizon on this day, at the very start of the day, is the exact time that the moon also happens to be crossing over from its old phase to start its new phase. It's the time when the moon is crossing over past the sun. So this happens exactly as the sun is coming up over the horizon on dawn on this day. But what also is amazing, I'm going to take away the landscape here so you can see this. So we'll remove the landscape. Is at this time we have everything here, the stars are gathered equidistant. They're all in the constellation Taurus, which is probably the first, the first month for that time because of the precession, the equinoxes. It probably moved to Aries later as the first month. But on this day, on April 10th, we have the moon is perfectly passing by the sun as the sun's coming up over the horizon. We have Jupiter and Mars each on either side of the sun, and then Mercury and Venus each on the other side of the sun. So you have a representation here of light in the sun and dark. You have a representation of male in Mercury and female opposite each other. And then you have the representation of the king in heaven and the earth, and the king rules over the earth. So you have the authority and the subject, okay? And so you have all this representation here. But the other thing is, if you look at the distance of Venus and Mercury, it gives you the distance of one of the signs of the zodiac. And so it kind of explains to you how to divvy up the zodiac into 12 sections. You have 12 lengths here. So there's a lot of information that's being basically conveyed to Adam at this point. And so this is taking place, assume this is day 6, okay? So if we back it up to the very first day, we're going to back it up to, we'll go back 7 days, okay? We come to April 3rd, so if this is the start date of creation, this is also the anniversary date. 4,000 years later to the day, if this is year 1 instead of year 0, 4,000 years later to the day is the day that Jesus was crucified. So that's very interesting. And also, the moon on that day is in the sign of Aquarius, which is the man carrying basically like a cross on his shoulder, the water bearer, and pouring water out of his side, just as Jesus poured water and blood out of the cross. Okay, so there's a lot of hidden stuff, is what I'm saying, that goes into the astronomy around this time. But I find this all very fascinating, that when you compare this to Genesis chapter 1, how well it lines up, given the fact that chronology would indicate that this is, in fact, the first year of creation. So I wanted to show this little kind of very interesting piece of astronomy. Oh, one other thing I want to show too. Remember how we talked about how the planets were each represent a day of the week? Okay. Well, all the planets here are gathered together, but there's one planet we left out. And that planet is completely at the opposite end of the zodiac, and that's Saturn. Okay, Saturn is way over here, kind of in Libra, in Judgment. And so Saturn is the planet Shabbati, or Sabbath, or the 7th planet, representing the 7th day. In fact, the name Saturday is named after Saturn. It's the Sabbath day. Saturn is set apart from all the other planets in this whole scenario. It's separate. It's out here on its own. So you have the 6 regular planets, and then you have the 7th day, the Sabbath, the Saturn planet, set apart, representing the 7th day, is separate from the other 6 days. Okay? So the whole kind of Genesis 1, again, is all kind of explained in the heavens in that first year of creation. So for me, like I said, this to me is amazing, and it's confirmation that my chronology is correct, that 3967 BC is in fact the first year of creation. Now, if we go back up before the start, if Taurus is in fact the first month at that time, but if creation starts back in Aries, then because in ancient times the new year starts in the spring, if we're going back a few weeks before the start of the new year, then technically on their New Year's reckoning, we start in 3968. So you may want to, if you're doing any calculation with this, I recommend that you subtract your years from 3968 BC from creation, because your numbers will add up correctly. Also because there's no year 0. 3967 is year 1, so that's just something to point out. But anyways, so this is what I found in the astronomy for the year of creation, and to me, it just it's a testament to how awesome God really is. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Please check out my other videos on Bible chronology. If you have any other questions on it, please leave a comment. Be sure to like and subscribe. And we look forward to seeing you in the next video. All right, thanks.